In the archival repository of the Russian State Archive of Contemporary History, under the code Special Folder Number 1, is stored a complex of documents that determined the vector of development for post-war relations in Eastern Europe. Sheet number 1 is a memorandum from the People's Commissar of Internal Affairs of the USSR, Lavrenti Beria, numbered 794/B, addressed to Joseph Stalin. The document is compiled on a standard form, dated March 1940. On the top margin of the first sheet, 4 resolutions are inscribed in blue pencil, those of Stalin, Voroshilov, Molotov, and Mikoyan. The margins also record the marks of agreement from Kalinin and Kaganovich, obtained via polling. The text contains a proposal to consider the cases of former Polish officers, policemen, gendarmes, prison guards, and intelligence personnel in a special manner, with the application of the highest measure of punishment. This document served as the starting point for a large-scale logistical and administrative operation in the spring of 1940. Before proceeding to a detailed analysis of the logistical chains, archival journals of the convoy troops, and military technical examinations of this operation, subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us develop the documentary chronicle direction and conduct detailed historical investigations based on primary sources. The unfolding of events began in September 1939, after the change of state borders in Eastern Europe. As a result of the conclusion of hostilities in the Polish campaign, a significant number of Polish army servicemen came under the control of Soviet troops. By order of the People's Commissar of Internal Affairs of the USSR number 0308 of September 19, 1939, the Administration for Prisoner of War and Internee Affairs under the NKVD of the USSR was created. The leadership of the administration was entrusted to Major Peter Soprunenko. The agency's primary task was to organize a network of camps for the placement of the arriving contingent. 3 main special camps were established. The Kozelsk camp was organized on the basis of the Optina Pustin Monastery in the Kaluga region, 250 kilometers southwest of Moscow. The Starobelsk camp was located in the Voroshilovgrad region of the Ukrainian SSR, on the territory of a former women's monastery. The Ostashkov camp occupied the territory of the Nilova Pustin on Stolobny Island on Lake Seliger in the Kalinin region. By November 1939, about 15,000 people, predominantly officers, police officers, border guards, and intelligence personnel, were concentrated in these 3 locations. Perimeter control was maintained by rifle units of the NKVD troops for the protection of particularly important industrial enterprises and convoy troops. The camps were supplied via the lines of the People's Commissariat of Railways. The capacity of the railway branches in the areas where the camps were located was limited. Archives have preserved reports from camp commanders about infrastructure overload. Living space standards per person did not exceed 1 square meter. Rations were calculated according to the minimum norm for prisoners, leading to a deterioration in sanitary conditions. By the beginning of 1940, the Administration for Prisoner of War Affairs had conducted a full operational registration of the contingent. A registration and interrogation file was opened for each prisoner. Based on the analysis of this data, a summary memorandum was prepared in February 1940, which formed the basis of Beria's aforementioned proposal. The decision of the Politburo of the Central Committee of the All-Union Communist Party, Bolsheviks, dated March 5, 1940, numbered P13/144, approved the directive to transfer the cases for consideration to an NKVD troika consisting of Vsevolod Merkulov, Bogdan Kobulov, and Leonid Bashtakov. The appointed commission received the authority to make decisions based on reports provided by the operational groups of the camps, without summoning the arrested and without presenting charges. The operation to remove prisoners from the camp rosters began in the first days of April 1940. The logistical plan involved dispatching the contingent in parties of 1 to 300 people via railway trains. The People's Commissariat of Railways provided special railcars refitted for convoy transport. The 136th Battalion of the NKVD convoy troops was responsible for the movement of the cargo. The routes were strictly classified. From the Kozelsk camp, the trains were directed to the Gnezdovo station, located 14 kilometers west of Smolensk. From there, the prisoners were transported by motor vehicle to the Katyn forest, to the territory of an NKVD dacha. From the Starobelsk camp, the contingent was delivered to Kharkiv, where they were placed in the internal prison of the regional NKVD administration. From the Ostashkov camp, people were transported to Kalinin, present-day Tver, also at the disposal of the local Internal Affairs Administration. In the Smolensk sector, the action was carried out by employees of the local administration under the leadership of the head of the NKVD administration, Dmitry Kuprianov, and the commandant, Ivan Stelmach. The carrying out of the sentences occurred directly at the pre-prepared pits in the Katyn forest or inside the Smolensk prison. In Kharkiv, the operation was led by the head of the administration, Pyotr Safonov, and the commandant, Timofey Kupri. Burials were conducted in the forest park area near the settlement of Piatikatki. In Kalinin, the technical leadership of the operation was entrusted to the head of the administration, Dmitry Tokarev, and for the direct execution of the actions, the head of the NKVD Administrative and Economic Department, Vasily Blokhin, was dispatched from Moscow. The removal from the roster in Kalinin took place in the cells of the internal prison, after which the bodies were taken by truck to the village of Mednoye, where deep trenches had been dug by excavators from the Komsomol Quarry Administration. An important technical detail of the operation, recorded in subsequent investigative materials, is the use of short-barreled weapons of German manufacture. For the actions, pistols of the Walther brand, caliber 7.65 mm, and cartridges from the company Gecko were used. This detail was dictated by technical regulations. Standard Soviet weapons, notably the Nagant system revolver and the TT pistol, had high power and, with intensive use, overheated, leading to mechanical failures. German pistols had less recoil and higher reliability for serial use. A shipment of this weaponry and ammunition had been purchased by the Soviet Union from Germany in the late 20s through trade representation channels. This logistical solution subsequently created serious difficulties for the Soviet side in attempts to construct an evidence base for a German trail. It is necessary here to record the first serious discrepancy in the archival sources and a planning error of the operation. According to the logs of the convoy troops, the total number of individuals removed from the camps does not match the final reports of the Administration for Prisoner of War Affairs by several dozen people. The reports of the 136th Battalion note instances of confusion with orders where prisoners with the same surnames were sent on incorrect routes. Furthermore, a topographical analysis of the burial sites in Katyn indicates that the initial plan for the placement of the pits did not account for the groundwater level in the spring of 1940. This led to the flooding of some trenches during the execution of the action, which forced the executors to urgently change the coordinates of the new burial sites, violating established secrecy requirements. Some pits ended up being located too close to clearings, which facilitated their subsequent discovery by the local population. By May 1940, the operation was completed. The total number of Polish citizens incapacitated across the three special camps amounted to 14,587 people. Simultaneously, an additional 7,350 people were removed from the roster in the prisons of Western Ukraine and Western Belarus. The situation remained static until the beginning of the Great Patriotic War. In July 1941, the Smolensk region was occupied by units of the German Army Group Center. In February 1943, soldiers of the 537th Signals Regiment of the Wehrmacht, under the command of Colonel Friedrich Ahrens, stationed in the Katyn area, discovered sites of mass graves. The discovery was promptly handed over to the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Propaganda of the Third Reich. Berlin decided to use this fact for a large-scale international campaign aimed at splitting the anti-Hitler coalition. Professor Gerhard Boots, the director of the Institute of Forensic Medicine at the University of Breslau, was engaged to conduct the exhumations. Under his leadership, the exhumation of more than 4,000 bodies was carried out. An international medical commission was formed, which included experts from 12 European countries under German control, as well as representatives of the Polish Red Cross. The Boots Commission recorded that all the recovered bodies were in winter and demi-season clothing, had gunshot wounds to the back of the skull, executed with weapons of 7 65/100ths of a millimeter caliber. A large number of documents were found, dated no later than April 1940. Anatomical changes in the tissues, the degree of skin maceration, and the condition of the internal organs indicated a 3-year period of the bodies being in the ground. Based on this data, the German side declared the NKVD of the USSR responsible for the liquidation of Polish citizens in the spring of 1940. The Soviet government immediately rejected these accusations. A statement from the Soviet Information Bureau on April 15, 1943, claimed that Polish prisoners of war in the summer of 1941 were engaged in construction work in special camps number 1, 2, and 3 in the Smolensk area, and, due to the rapid advance of German troops, were not evacuated in a timely manner, after which they were captured and exterminated by the German occupiers. After the liberation of Smolensk by units of the Red Army in September 1943, a special group of NKVD and NKGB officers arrived on the scene, led by Vsevolod Merkulov and Sergei Kruglov. Their task was to prepare the infrastructure for the work of an official state commission. In January 1944, a special commission for establishing and investigating the circumstances of the execution of Polish prisoners of war by the German fascist invaders in the Katyn forest was established. The commission was headed by the chief surgeon of the Red Army, academician Nikolai Burdenko. It also included the writer Alexei Tolstoy, Metropolitan Nikolai, and other public figures. The Burdenko Commission conducted its own excavations, exhuming 925 bodies. A report published following its work claimed that the executions were carried out in August to September 1941 by the German 537th Construction Battalion. Witness testimonies from local residents and documents allegedly found on the bodies, dated late 1940 and 1941, were cited as evidence. Here, the second major discrepancy in the sources becomes clearly apparent, resulting from the hasty actions of Merkulov and Kruglov's group in fabricating evidence. The report of the Burdenko Commission mentions receipts, letters, and newspapers dated August to September 1941, allegedly found in the pockets of the deceased. However, forensic medical examination and the laws of taphonomy indicate the impossibility of paper media preserving a readable condition after being in the high-moisture, sandy clay soil of the Katyn forest for 2.5 years. The documents, planted during the preparation of the graves for the official inspection, showed no traces of soil-water impact or decay processes characteristic of the clothing in which they were supposedly found. This technical inconsistency destroyed the logic of the Soviet argumentation under detailed cross-analysis. Furthermore, the Soviet side made an error in identifying the German unit, referring to the 537th Signals Regiment as a construction battalion, a claim easily refuted by data from open Wehrmacht staff documents captured by the Allies. The Soviet leadership attempted to cement the findings of the Burdenko Commission internationally during the Nuremberg trials in 1946. The Soviet prosecutor, Assistant Chief Prosecutor Yuri Pokrovsky, included the Katyn episode in the overall structure of the charges under the section on war crimes. Forensic expert Viktor Prozorovsky and the former deputy mayor of Smolensk, Boris Bazilevsky, acted as prosecution witnesses. However, the defense for the German generals, led by attorney Otto Stammer, called former officers of the 537th Signals Regiment, including Colonel Ahrens, to testify. Ahrens's testimony and a detailed analysis of ballistic examinations revealed profound contradictions in the Soviet version. The tribunal, assessing the density of the presented evidence and the temporal inconsistencies in the prosecution's argument, decided not to include the Katyn massacre in the final judgment of the court. This meant the de facto non-recognition of German guilt by an international legal body, although the Soviet side officially continued to insist on its version. The third critical discrepancy is related to the internal documentary base of the Soviet state itself, which for decades completely refuted its official statements. This refers to the memorandum from Alexander Shilipin, chairman of the KGB under the Council of Ministers of the USSR, to Nikita Khrushchev, dated March 3, 1959, numbered N-632-SH. Shilipin reported that the KGB held registration files on the liquidated Polish citizens and proposed destroying all personal files to prevent information leaks, preserving only the protocols of the NKVD Troika sessions. This proposal was approved and executed. This internal logistical operation to purge the archives directly contradicted the foreign policy statements of the USSR Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which, until 1990, continued to cite the materials of the Burdenko Commission as the only correct ones. The storage of these documents under the strictest secrecy in the special file of the Politburo proves that the country's top leadership clearly understood the falsity of the official propaganda version and spent significant administrative resources on maintaining this information blockade. The situation changed in the late 1980s during the period of the policy of glasnost. A joint commission of Soviet and Polish scientists was created to study the blank spots in the history of bilateral relations. Soviet researchers gained access to the funds of the Central State Archive, where the echelon lists of the NKVD Directorate for Prisoner of War Affairs were discovered. These lists matched name for name with the German exhumation lists of 1943. On April 13, 1990, the Telegraph Agency of the Soviet Union published an official statement acknowledging that the Katyn tragedy was one of the grave crimes of Stalinism, and that Beria, Merkulov, and their subordinates bore direct responsibility for it. On the same day, USSR President Mikhail Gorbachev handed over to Polish President Wojciech Jaruzelski the lists of Polish prisoners of war from the NKVD camps. In October 1992, on the orders of Russian President Boris Yeltsin, the country's chief archivist, Rudolf Pikoya, handed over to Polish President Lech Walesa certified copies of documents from Special Folder No. 1, including Beria's note from March 1940 and the Politburo decision. The main military prosecutor's office of the Russian Federation initiated criminal case No. 159, the investigation of which continued until 2004. During the investigation, surviving participants in the events were interrogated, including the former head of the NKVD Directorate for the Kalinin region, Dmitry Tokarev, whose testimony described in detail the entire mechanism for implementing the Politburo directive. Joint Russian-Polish exhumations conducted in 1991 to 1995 at the burial sites in Mednoye and Piatikotki confirmed the findings of the investigation. Thousands of remains in Polish military uniforms, personal belongings, state awards and insignia, as well as cartridge casings of 7.65 mm caliber, were discovered. The state of preservation of the remains in the peat layers of Mednoye allowed for precise identification of individuals based on surviving identification tags. This completely ruled out the possibility of these individuals being in German captivity in the summer of 1941, as geographically these areas were not part of the zone of the construction camps near Smolensk mentioned in the Burdenko report. The final statistical analysis of the operation shows that the total number of Polish citizens, confirmed by archival documents, who lost their lives as a result of the implementation of the decision of March 5, 1940, is 21,857. Of these, 4,421 were taken from the Kozelsk camp, 3,820 from the Starobelsk camp, 6,311 from the Ostashkov camp, and 7,350 from the prisons of the western regions of Ukraine and Belarus. Based on this data, at the turn of the millennium, the Katyn and Mednoye memorial complexes were created, functioning as state museums. The technical audit of the Katyn case demonstrates how a large-scale state operation to incapacitate the officer corps of a foreign army led to the creation of a long-standing system of informational cover-up. The documents from Special Folder No. 1, the journals of the NKVD convoy troops, and the materials of the main military prosecutor's office make it possible to reconstruct the chronology of events with accuracy down to individual echelons and duty roster numbers. The analysis of this information excludes hypothetical versions and shifts the discussion of the problem from the plane of political manipulation to the realm of verifiable historical science. Continuing a detailed analysis of the archival collections, it is necessary to pay attention to the structure of interaction between the central apparatus of the NKVD and regional departments during the spring operation of 1940. Document flow was carried out through the NKVD USSR courier communication system, which ensured the delivery of secret packages within 24 hours of signing. Fund No. 1 of the NKVD Secretariat contains directives regulating the procedure for accounting for property left behind after the departure of Polish military personnel. Valuables, including gold items, currency, and wristwatches, were subject to seizure and shipment to the financial department of the NKVD USSR in Moscow. Personal items of no material value, such as letters, photographs, and diaries, were ordered to be destroyed on site by burning, as recorded in acts signed by the chairman of camp commissions. However, as the subsequent exhumation in Buts showed, this instruction was not fully carried out. The presence of diaries in the pockets of Polish officers' overcoats allowed for the recording of the exact dates when the entries ceased, falling in the period from April 7th to May 10th, 1940. This fact became a key chronological marker, refuting the version of the contingent's presence in special purpose camps in the summer of 1941. Moving to the analysis of the camp's technical support, it should be noted that the NKVD departmental construction organizations had completed the laying of narrow-gauge access roads to peat extraction sites in the Ostashkov and Kozelsk regions by April 1940. The transport load on these lines increased sharply during the period of train dispatches. According to reports from the People's Commissariat of Railways, E-series steam locomotives, which ensured train movement at an average speed of 30 kilometers per hour, were used to transport the contingent. Such low speed was due to the priority given to passing Red Army military trains and freight trains moving along the main lines. The convoy escort for each train consisted of 30 to 40 riflemen, armed with Mosin system rifles and Degtyaryov hand machine guns. According to the regulations of the convoy troops, the perimeter of loading and unloading stations was cordoned off 2 hours before the train's arrival, and civilians were removed from the line of sight by local police forces. This ensured a high level of secrecy during the first stage of transportation, but created a labor shortage at railway junctions, as recorded in the complaints from the station masters of Smolensk and Kharkov-Tovarny. The arrival of trains at their final destinations required coordination with the motor transport departments of the NKVD regional administrations. On the balance sheet of the Smolensk NKVD administration in the spring of 1940, there were 12 ZIS-5 trucks and 3 specialized buses. The technical condition of the vehicle fleet was unsatisfactory due to a shortage of spare parts and fuel and lubricants. Reports from the head of the Motor Transport Department noted that the daily gasoline consumption in April exceeded limits by 300%. To cover the deficit, fuel was seized from the stocks of civil organizations in the Smolensk region using special warrants from the Regional Committee of the VKP-B. This logistical maneuver left a trace in the region's economic documentation, becoming another indirect confirmation of a large-scale unscheduled operation during the specified period. In Kharkov and Kalinin, the load on motor transport was similar, with the transportation of bodies carried out at night to minimize the risk of the movements being recorded by the local population. Of particular interest for military technical analysis are the materials from exhumations concerning the typology of hand-binding knots found on the bodies of the deceased. In Katyn and Mednoye, a portion of the bodies had hands tied behind their backs using a special paper cord of Soviet manufacture. The knot was executed in such a way that any attempt to move the hands would tighten a loop around the neck, depriving the person of the possibility to resist. This restraint technique was a standard element of the operational practice of the USSR state security organs of that period, and was not used in the practice of the German field gendarmerie or SD detachments. German investigative bodies in 1943 recorded this fact, taking detailed photographs of the knots, which were later included in the official publication of Materials on the Katyn Crime, published in Berlin. The Soviet Burdenko Commission in 1944 completely ignored this aspect, providing no alternative explanation for the origin of the specific cord, which indicates a selective approach to forming the evidentiary base. In the context of researching the propaganda confrontation surrounding the Katyn issue, the analysis of the activities of the Wehrmacht propaganda department, known as propaganda companies, plays an important role. Starting in April 1943, the Smolensk direction became key for German journalists and documentary filmmakers. Regular press tours were organized to Katyn for representatives of neutral states, including journalists from Sweden, Switzerland, and Spain. The goal of these events was to create significant international resonance. The German side deployed a field laboratory at the excavation site where chemical treatment of found documents was conducted to prevent their deterioration in the air. All recovered items were numbered and placed in special wooden boxes. This collection of boxes, dubbed the Katyn Archive, was evacuated to Germany during the retreat of German troops at the end of 1943. Subsequently, in the spring of 1945, this archive was destroyed in Dresden during the Allied bombing, complicating the work of subsequent researchers who were forced to rely only on copies of the inspection protocols. The Soviet counteraction in the information field was built on the principles of strict centralization. All materials prepared for publication based on the work of the Burdenko Commission underwent preliminary censorship in the International Information Department of the Central Committee of the All-Union Communist Party, Bolsheviks. Initial drafts of the Commission's report contained a number of formulations that allowed for ambiguous interpretation regarding the ballistic characteristics of the 7.65 mm caliber bullet. These formulations were personally removed by Alexander Shcherbakov, who oversaw the Soviet Information Bureau. In their place, directive assertions were inserted stating that the use of German weapons was unconditional proof of the guilt of the perpetrators from among the Wehrmacht military personnel. This approach precluded the possibility of scientific discussion in the Soviet press, and any doubts about the official version were interpreted as anti-Soviet agitation, leading to criminal prosecution for several Soviet citizens in the post-war years. Analyzing the legal aspect of the Nuremberg tribunal process, it is necessary to consider the tactical error of the Soviet prosecution, made when submitting written materials. The indictment relied exclusively on the text of the Burdenko Commission report without appending the original witness interrogation protocols and forensic examination reports. This gave the German defense the opportunity to use Article 39 of the tribunal's charter and demand the submission of additional materials for review. During the resulting procedural pause, defense attorney Otto Stammer managed to contact the technical services of the former Army Group Center and obtain the combat logs of the 537th Signals Regiment. These documents recorded that the regiment had arrived in Katyn only in November 1941, whereas the Burdenko Commission claimed that the shootings had taken place in August to September of the same year, carried out by this unit. This temporal discrepancy deprived the Soviet prosecution of a key argument, as the regiment could not have committed the crimes in question before its physical arrival at the deployment site. The subsequent period from 1950 to 1980 was characterized by the entrenchment of the party's positions. In the USA in 1951 to 1952, the Select Committee of the House of Representatives to investigate the Katyn crime, known as the Madden Commission, was active. It interviewed hundreds of witnesses, including former Polish prisoners of war who had managed to avoid liquidation in the spring of 1940 thanks to their transfer to the Gryazovets camp. The final report of the Madden Commission unequivocally placed the blame on the Soviet side and recommended transferring the case to the UN International Court. The Soviet Union reacted with an official note of protest, calling the Commission's work interference in the internal affairs of the USSR and an attempt to sabotage peace initiatives within the framework of the Korean War. KGB logistics reports from this period show that, parallel to the foreign policy démarches, a verification of the preservation of the remaining documents in the regional archives of Smolensk, Tver, and Kharkiv was carried out, with the aim of preventing their accidental discovery by researchers. An institutional shift in the investigation became possible only after the change in the political course of the USSR in the late 1980s. The work of the joint Polish-Soviet Commission of Experts on the history of the two countries revealed a deep crisis in official Soviet historiography. Soviet historians, having gained access to the archives of the NKVD Main Directorate of Convoy Troops, discovered transfer orders for prisoners signed by Bashtakov. These documents contained clear instructions to send specific individuals at the disposal of the NKVD directorates for the Smolensk, Kalinin, and Kharkiv regions, without specifying a further destination. Combined with the complete absence of any mentions of these individuals in camp records after May 1940, these orders became direct evidence of their removal from the roster within the specified time frame. This discovery made it impossible to maintain the Burdenko Commission's version at the state level any further. The official acknowledgement of the USSR's responsibility in April 1990 necessitated the legal formalization of the facts. The Russian Federation's main military prosecutor's office, within the framework of criminal case number 159, carried out colossal work to verify the archival data. Handwriting examinations were conducted of the signatures of Stalin, Beria, and other members of the Politburo on documents from Special Folder Number 1. Experts from the Central Forensic Science Center of the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs confirmed the authenticity of all signatures and the conformity of the paper and ink to the technological standards of 1940. This refuted the versions of conspiracy theorists who claimed the documents could have been falsified during the Perestroika period. The results of these examinations were officially included in the materials of the criminal case and formed the basis of the Russian Federation's legal position announced in subsequent international courts. During the investigation, particular attention was given to the interrogation of Dmitry Tokarev, the former head of the NKVD for the Kalinin region. His testimony, recorded on videotape in March 1991, contains a detailed description of the technological process of the operation in Kalinin. Tokarev testified that a specially equipped chamber was used for the executions, its walls lined with soundproofing materials and its doors padded with felt. The executioners worked in shifts, processing up to 200 people per night. The bodies were removed through a back exit into the prison's inner courtyard, where they were loaded onto flatbed trucks. This testimony fully coincides with the topographical data from the excavations in Mednoye, where the location of the trenches and the depth of the remains corresponded to the scheme of the construction equipment's operation as described by Tokarev. The current state of the Katyn issue is characterized by a high level of memorialization and the completion of basic historical research. In 2010, the State Duma of the Russian Federation adopted the statement on the Katyn tragedy and its victims, which officially recognized that the Katyn crime was carried out on the direct orders of Stalin and other Soviet leaders. This step solidified the consolidated position of the Russian executive and legislative branches based on archival documents. The opening of memorial complexes has created the conditions for holding annual commemorative events with the participation of representatives from both countries, which contributes to the depoliticization of the subject and its transition into the realm of academic study. Thus, a detailed reconstruction of events based on documents, combat logs, and logistical reports demonstrates the fallacy of the long-standing state-sponsored concept of the German Trail. Every link in this operation, from the signing of Beria's note to the movement of trains from the 136th Convoy Troops Battalion and the work of excavators in Mednoye, is recorded in paper sources that have undergone repeated verification. The study of these materials allows for a dry conclusion, stripped of ideological layers, about the mechanisms of the state apparatus's functioning in the pre-war period and the methods of creating informational falsifications, which were dismantled by the development of archival science and forensic methods.